In this video, I'll be going over the biggest surprises and disappointments of the 2025 Open Mr. Olympia prejudging. I'm sure all of you are excited to see the results of one of the most stacked Olympias ever, but there were definitely some bodybuilders who surpassed their expectations and others who underdelivered big time. Starting off with the first big surprise of the 2025 Open Olympia prejudging, Martin Fitzwater. Honestly, after his last two shows, he fell a bit under the radar in my own opinion. His Prague Pro performance right after the 2024 Mr. Olympia was just about average in my opinion, and then Pittsburgh earlier this year was straight up rough, especially in prejudging I would say. But this weekend he completely turned things around. Martin came in sharper, drier, and very detailed. His overall separation was night and day compared to the earlier season, and his X-frame was spot on, his shape and flow was really good, and his arms looked noticeably bigger and rounder, probably the best he's ever shown. One of his biggest improvements was the waist control as well. It was much tighter than his last two showings, which made his silhouette look way more aesthetic and improved his front poses. You could tell he put a lot more effort into staying tight between shots, and in my opinion, it definitely paid off. If there's anything to critique, his quads maybe were not quite as full and as impressive as they were at the 2024 Olympia, but that's pretty minor, because from front and back, Martin was ridiculous. The glute and hamstring detail, the overall separation and graininess, and the lower back definition, everything from every angle was really impressive, and it was easily one of the most complete looks on that stage. Now, overall, this version was really the one that everyone's been waiting for. Martin finally nailed the balance between condition, shape, and presentation, like at the 2024 Olympia, but maybe even better. He went from falling behind a bit earlier this year to proving again why he's a real threat, and that's why he was one of the biggest surprises of the night. Now for a disappointment of the 2025 Open Olympia prejudging, Behruz Tabani. There was a lot of hype surrounding his debut, especially after everything he went through when it came to visa issues, keeping him from competing in the US before. A lot of fans were rooting for him and expected him to come in as a dark horse who could shake up the top rankings. But honestly, in my opinion, he did not really deliver. His conditioning was not there, his quads had almost no separation, and the overall look was kind of soft and watery from both the front and back. The sharper detail that we saw from him overseas earlier this year at Dubai, for example, was definitely missing. His back poses, which are usually lights out, lacked that dense, dry look that you definitely need to stand out at this level. Size-wise, he also did not look nearly as big or as imposing as expected either. Against this lineup, he blended in instead of standing out, and that is definitely not what you want for your Olympia debut. It's tough because everyone wanted him to finally show what he could do on the biggest stage, but this version was not it. The conditioning was off, the muscle detail was flat, and there was really no point during prejudging where he looked like a real potential title contender. For all the hype, and maybe despite all the hype, Behruz kind of ended up being one clear disappointment of the entire prejudging. Next up for surprises, Andrew Jacked. He came in looking phenomenal at this year's Olympia prejudging. The glute and hamstring separation was the best we've ever seen from him yet, and his forearms even looked fuller, and he nailed that balance between condition and fullness that he had been missing before at the Olympia. He looked big, round, and incredibly aesthetic as always, which is the kind of look that makes you stop and stare when he hits a pose. To me, what really stood out, though, was how competitive he looked next to the reigning champion, Samson Dauda. In several poses like the front double, front lat spread, ab and thigh, and even the most muscular, Andrew arguably looked better. His structure just flows naturally, and when he's full like this, the lines and proportions really pop under the lights. Even his rear double looked surprisingly better than Samson's, which was definitely a shocker. Now, he is not really 100% dialed in though. The quads could use a bit more sweep, and his lower body overall still trails slightly behind a guy like Samson or Derek when it comes to thickness and balance and even separation. But in terms of presentation and overall impact, this was one of the best versions of Andrew we have ever seen. He looked like a top-tier contender, he was big, aesthetic, confident, and finally peaking at the right time. Easily one of the most standout surprises of all of prejudging. Now for one of the biggest letdowns, Rubio Nexzilla Mascara. After tightening up for the Italy and Portugal pros earlier in the summer and looking fantastic in both, expectations were definitely higher for him heading into the Olympia. He proved earlier this season that when he nails his condition, he is very dangerous. But this version looked more like a disappointing Dubai Pro look, big, full, but not really sharp, and it really was disappointing in my own opinion. His glutes and hamstrings looked soft and watery, almost like an off-season version of himself. From the back, there really was not any separation, and that really exposed him in the lineup. The upper body still looked freaky with massive arms, wide lats, and great fullness in the chest and delts, and he even had nice side leg feathering, but overall the look was kind of flat in detail and missing that really sharp finish that he might have had in Europe. Honestly, mass and fullness were really the only two things that he had, and while his legs are still some of the most ridiculous in the division, size alone does not win on the Olympia stage. Fans know what Rubio can look like when he nails it, so seeing him revert to the less conditioned Dubai Pro version was a huge letdown. This was a really big missed opportunity in my own opinion, for someone who clearly has top tier potential if he ever nails the right formula. Also, if you guys are enjoying the video so far, like and sub would really be awesome, as it helps out the channel tremendously. Next up for surprises, we have Brandon Curry. A lot of people had written Brandon off going into this year's Olympia, and after how flat and off he looked at the 2024 Olympia, expectations were kind of low. Most fans didn't even really have him cracking into the higher callouts. But to his credit, he came in way better this time. The peak was solid, he was fuller, rounder, and decently conditioned, especially by his own standards. What really stood out to me, though, was how balanced and complete he was. The upper body had that trademark fullness we expect from him, huge delts, full chest, and a very tight midsection. His legs, which have always been criticized, actually did look pretty good. They had more shape and volume, and while they're not really on the level of the very top best guys, they did not look like a huge issue or an eyesore anymore. Now, look, he's not competing for the win or even a top spot, but this version of Brandon was a nice surprise. He still looked confident, polished, and hungry, like a veteran reminding everyone that he's still here and still capable of pushing some younger names. Considering where he was last year as well, this was one of the most encouraging performances of the entire night and proof that Brandon Curry still has gas left in the tank. Now for one of the most overhyped storylines going into the Olympia, Urs Kalasinski's open debut. A lot of people were talking like Urs could break into the top 6 or even top 5, but that was never realistic. He came in with great condition as always, and his shape and flow are amazing. From the front, he does look fantastic, tight waist, clean lines, and that classic physique aesthetic that made him a fan favorite in the open. But once you turn him around, the problems show immediately. His back is not on the level of any open competitors. There's really no thickness, density, or even condition, and it might honestly be one of the weakest backs we've seen on stage in a long time, right up there with Akeem Williams, and that's not a high bar to pass. He also looked very small overall. Next to the top names, the size gap was massive, even despite his taller frame, and the arms and back especially were really noticeable. Overall, it's definitely clear that he still looks like a slightly bigger classic guy. His condition and symmetry are impressive, but in the open you still need that freak factor, the width, the density, and the maturity as well, and he does not really have that yet. Urs looked good for what he is, but nowhere near the top call-out material. The hype definitely got ahead of reality, and this showing made that obvious. Now for a welcome surprise, Tonio Burden. Now, Tonio really impressed me at this year's Olympia prejudging. He came in looking sharp, full, and balanced, and it honestly felt like a redemption after his earlier loss to Beirut in the Dubai Pro, where he actually took third. This time, he clearly got the upper hand. His fullness was right where it needed to be, and the separation across his entire physique really stood out, especially in the legs and the arms, and really all over, like I said. His back was one of the most detailed on stage, extremely sharp, detailed, and full of fine lines that showed just how hard he worked for that look. What stood out the most, though, was how complete the shape looked overall. Tonio's structure flows really well in my own opinion. He's got wider shoulders, a tight waist, waist, and great balance from top to bottom. The legs, especially the quads, were thick and detailed, the arms were round and full, and his overall presentation was really polished. Sure, he could still use a bit more size overall to hang with the best of the best in terms of mass, and the shoulders might raise a few eyebrows if you know what I mean, but even so, the physique itself was very impressive. He has steadily added quality muscle over the years without ruining his shape, and it is definitely paying off now. Tonio's one of those guys who just keeps improving quietly, and this was easily one of his best and most competitive looks yet, definitely a pleasant surprise at prejudging. Here is truly one of the biggest disappointments of prejudging, Samson Dauda. Heading into the Olympia, expectations for Samson were sky high, obviously, being the reigning Mr. Olympia. After how dominant he looked at the 2024 Olympia, most people thought that he would come in this year ready to lock up another title. But honestly, this version just was not it. Honestly, the look seemed more reminiscent of his 2023 Olympia showing, good but a bit flat and not nearly as sharp as he should be. From the front, his quads did not really have the same sweep or pop as last year. The abs looked soft and flatter, especially compared to the razor-sharp detail we saw in 2024. From behind, it was even more noticeable too. The glutes and hamstrings did not have any thin skin condition, and the overall look lacked the signature roundness Samson is known for. It was not a bad physique by any means, but relative to his own standard and the hype coming in, it was definitely underwhelming. It felt like a strategic misstep. Maybe he was going to come in a little bit sharper and smaller, but got scared that he was going to be too flat and too small, so he decided to carb up and spilled over and ended up with this kind of full but washed out look. The good news is, though, is that Samson has shown that he can tighten up fast, so there's still a big chance that he improves for finals and maybe pulls off a win, but for prejudging, this was definitely a letdown. Fans, myself included, were hoping for a sharper, more dominant Samson, and instead we got a physique that looked like a small step back. Next up for the biggest and final surprise, Derek Lunsford. No matter how you feel about him personally, Derek looked incredible at prejudging. This was one of his best peaks ever. He was sharp, conditioned, had great fullness, and the quads were absolutely spot on. From every angle, he looked balanced and complete, and sure, the arm separation and the chest detail are not perfect, but when you look at the total package, he was easily one of the most complete bodybuilders on that entire stage. I think immediately I noticed how dialed in he was. The back was obviously on another level, easily the best in the show. I mean, we all knew that. It was thick, wide, and dialed in and detailed from top to bottom. He flowed cleanly in every single pose, and you could tell that his timing and posing was spot on. After the mixed reactions from his Pittsburgh Pro win over Nick Walker earlier this year, a lot of people doubted that he would look ready to contend for another Olympia title, but he proved everyone wrong, including myself. This was the version of Derek people had been anticipating, perfectly peaked, balanced, and polished. He looked confident, controlled, and composed, and he matched or beat everyone in nearly every mandatory pose. Whether you like him or not, you have to admit this was an elite performance. If he holds this look into finals, he might just become the second ever man to win, lose, and then win back the Olympia. This was definitely an amazing, massive comeback performance, and one of the biggest positive surprises of the night, even if you don't like Derek for his own personality. Now for the Now we have the final and biggest disappointment of the entire prejudging, Nick Walker. Coming into the Olympia, Nick had all the momentum and all the hype. At the press conference, he straight up said he was winning the show, and a lot of fans believed it. But once prejudging had started, it was clear that the version that he brought was not really up to everyone's expectations. His waist was out of control, and it completely threw off his shape frontally. The flow was gone, the balance was off, and he did not have that confident stage presence we're used to seeing from him. From the back, he still looked really impressive. He was really thick and detailed and pretty freaky, but it was not enough to save him. The quads looked pretty average. They weren't really at the best that we've seen. The front poses overall lacked pop, and the overall look did not give him the hype at all. It's honestly very disappointing because everyone wanted to see the underdog story, the comeback after the injury, the redemption arc, but it did not happen. You could tell he knew it as well. The confidence was not there when he was posing, and by the time the callouts were done, it was obvious he was not in that final group. Realistically, 4th or 5th is probably his ceiling this year, and I'm sure he's more disappointed than anyone, but as fans, this was a tough one to watch. Nick Walker came in saying that he was going to win the Olympia, but this version simply was not it, and he ended up being more like Nick Talker than anything. Anyways, that about does it for this video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and your predictions for the Open Olympia as well. With that being said, I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.